Hello, everyone. Sorry about that. And thank you again for attending today's webinar. I will be your host. My name is Corin Grzelick, and I'm a forensic nurse specialist with the International Association of Forensic Nurses. In my role, I provide training and technical assistance on the National SAFE protocols, the National IPV protocols, the National Training Standards, and topics related to payment for medical forensic examinations. Before I introduce our presenters for today's webinar, just a couple of acknowledgments and disclosures. This webinar was supported by a grant by awarded by the Office on Violence Against Women in the U.S. Department of Justice. The opinions, findings, conclusions, and recommendations expressed in this presentation are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the views of the U.S. Department of Justice. In order to receive a certificate documenting attendance and contact hours, attending the course in its entirety, and completing the post-course evaluation, you will receive a certificate that documents the continuing nursing education and contact hours for this activity. The planners and presenters of this webinar have no relevant financial relationships and ineligible companies to disclose. And the International Association of Forensic Nurses is accredited as a provider of continuing education by the American Nurses Credentialing Center's Commission on Accreditation. So before I'd like to introduce to you our presenter, Leslie Orloff. She will be presenting today, but she also worked on this webinar with Rafaela Rodriguez, and they are both from the National Immigrant Women's Advocacy Project. I will go ahead and turn it over to Leslie for her introduction.
Thank you. And I apologize for Rafaela not being here. She took the bar and is taking a vacation in Brazil and is not in a location, which she thought she might be, where she has internet access. So we prepared this together and I'm presenting it for both of us here. So thank you so much to the International Association of Forensic Nurses, to Corin, and to Mary Kate at NCJ-FCJ for hosting this. My name is Leslie Orloff. I direct the National Immigrant Women's Advocacy Project at American University, Washington College of Law, and we provide, training and technical assistance and legal research and are available to answer questions about immigrant survivors of sexual assault, domestic violence, dating violence, stalking, child abuse, and human trafficking. At the conclusion of this webinar, participants will have an increased knowledge of the process of payment and reimbursement for sexual assault medical forensic exams conducted on immigrant survivors, including immigrant survivors' legal rights and the resources to which they can be connected for assistance. In more detail, we're going to the objectives of this webinar. At the end of this webinar, you'll be able to describe the legal requirements and rights for payment and reimbursement for medical forensic exams involving immigrant survivors. You'll be able to identify and process, the processes and the resources and the options available to immigrant survivors of sexual assault for payment of their medical forensic exams, and their related and figure out where to send them, know where to send them for related healthcare needs. You'll be able to help survivors access medical forensic exams, related follow-up in terms of healthcare, mental health care, and other benefits and services to which survivors are eligible, and implement strategies for trauma-informed, patient-centered care for immigrant survivors of sexual assault. But before we get started, that's who I am. And you'll also see I have asked Sarah Register, my Dean's Fellow at American University, Washington College of Law, who's going to assist me. I want to encourage you to type your questions in the chat, and we'll answer them as we go. If you ask questions that require more research, I'll be working with Sarah and Rafaela, and post this webinar, we will get back to you with any unanswered questions. And after the webinar, either way, we're going to send you links to the recording to the webinar and to a number of resources. But for now, Mary Kate, the first poll, please. Thank you. Please let us know who you are. I want to get a sense of who is on this call with us today. And I'll take a sip of tea while we're waiting. So we're going to wait. Good. Yay, Mary Kate, we have a relatively fast bunch. We appreciate that. Okay, let's end the poll or share the poll. And what you'll see is about 57% of you are SANE or forensic nurses. 6% of you are healthcare providers. 26% of you are victim advocates. And then the other is about 11%, and that includes people from government, as well as SANE nurses, new graduate nurses, and somebody from, looks like a high school, maybe, I'm not sure. Or Johns Hopkins, no, it's Johns Hopkins, I'm pretty sure. Okay, excellent. Next slide, please, or I got that. So what we're going to do now is talk about coverage for forensic costs of the exams for immigrants. So medical forensic exam coverages are governed as a matter of law. I'm the law professor, so this is what we're talking about, is by the Violence Against Women Act. There were provisions in VAWA 2005 and 2013 that really govern all forensic medical exams conducted by SANE nurses. And under VAWA 2005, states must provide or arrange for, at no cost, rape kits for sexual assault survivors to qualify for STOP grant funding, which are the block grants funds that come from the federal government as part of the Violence Against Women Act to the states. Medical forensic exams are to be available to all survivors without requiring a police report or justice system cooperation. One of the things we're going to talk about in this webinar today is the unique position that immigrant survivors are in that this is a group of survivors that the question about whether or not to make a police report or whether or not to participate in a justice system case related to the sexual assault has immigration implications. So survivors who choose to report have more access to immigration relief than survivors who choose not to. So it becomes a balance between privacy issues and immigration relief options that to make an informed choice, survivors need to know about it. We'll be diving into that later on in the webinar. Under VAWA, in VAWA 2013, that prohibits states from charging rape kits and later charging victims for rape kits and then reimbursing survivors for out-of-pocket expenses. Instead, the rape kit, what the rape kit covers, the cost of the rape kit must be paid for to the hospital by the state and with no out-of-pocket charge to the victims. And states and healthcare providers under VAWA 2013 are required to notify victims of their right to receive a rape kit and to not be charged for it. Now, when you're talking about immigrant survivors, notification can't only be in English. So one of the things that's going to be important is to ensure that the languages that are predominantly that you're encountering in your community are the rape kit notice is available to them in those languages, and or you're providing interpreters to communicate that information to somebody who speaks a language where it's not interpreted. So I see in the questions a question about VAWA's definition of a medical forensic exam. Corin, can I kick that one to you about what is generally included in the kit?
Yes. So generally, VAWA defines a medical forensic examination as, and this is what it's included, the process of acquiring the data, so pertinent, a comprehensive forensic medical history. So the process of acquiring pertinent data from the patient to establish a comprehensive forensic medical history, a comprehensive assessment of the patient's physical conditioning, encompassing a thorough examination from head to toe, and then the comprehensive recording of any biological or physical observations, and the process of gathering evidence from the patient. And then the utilization of a specified examination equipment and supplies, and including the healthcare provider who's performing the exam. Now, where it gets a little bit different is that the states also are allowed to include things outside of that. So that's the basic form of what they say VAWA says that has to be provided, but states include other things. And we'll get into that more. Leslie's going to talk more into that. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, we're going to dive into that a bit more. What's important here too is that immigration status is irrelevant for exam payment. Immigrant survivors of sexual assault must not be charged any out-of-pocket expenses related to the rape kit, the medical forensic exam, as Corinne described it. And that as to charges to the insurance companies, if a state asks or requires a victim to submit charges for rape exams to the insurance company, any copays or deductibles must be charged to the state, not to the victim. And that's VAWA, that's everyone. Now, there was research done in 2022 that showed that there were still privately insured women who were receiving post-assault care and charged out-of-pocket costs, which is not supposed to be happening. And so I wanted to explain that that's the law, but sometimes it's going to take advocacy and work to get that fully happening in every state. So we're going to give you a quiz now, some of which Corinne helped us with, but select all that apply. What services and costs must be included in the rape kit, the medical forensic exam? Can we have the poll, Mary Kate? Hello?
Sorry, it's coming.
It's coming. Okay.
It's taking 1 second. There we go.
Okay. So check all that apply. What services and costs must be included in the medical forensic kit? Few seconds. We have about half of you. Almost at 70%. A few more. Okay, I think we're going to share. And what we see is that up in the 90% of you, it is, as Corinne said, information from the patient for a medical needed for a medical history, head to toe physical assessment, documentation of the biological and physical findings, and collection of evidence from the patient are the things that are kind of the standard part of it. So then in your states, given the experience that you've had, what costs are you finding are not included with the medical exam in your state? And can you type those in? And this gets at one of the questions in the chat, but what are some of the things that from your experience, are not a standard part of that? Can some of you join us? Strangulation assessments is one person typed. Domestic violence assessments. MRIs. Injury treatment and imaging. Corinne, the NPEP, that's can you describe what that is?
Yeah, so NPEP is the treatment and the medications for the HIV and prophylaxis.
Okay. And then we've got pregnancy tests, lab tests, prophylactic medications, injury treatment, strangulation diagnosis, post-assault medicals that are picked up outside of the emergency room, a CT scan related to strangulation, additional injury treatment. And I don't know, the people that are saying human trafficking, what do you mean by that? That's an interesting point. If you're talking about victim advocacy, or, I mean, I'd be curious to know what the people that, a couple of people type trafficking, what they mean by that. There might be if the patient presents to the ER and they're trafficking victim, or any victim. I mean, there may be ER costs that are not considered part of the exam. Okay. So, excellent. And screening for human trafficking, I understand. And community, okay. So, and somebody's saying that in a community-based center, payment is often a problem. So let's talk about what happens. And emergency contraception may or may not, depending on the state. So the things that are generally beyond the rape kit, the medical forensic exam, are STI testing, post-exposure prophylactics beyond the original dose. Some places you'll get the first dose and then they'll have to go to a pharmacy or someplace else to fill the second dose. Emergency contraception, oral or injected medicines like antibiotics. You got all these CAT scans, MRIs, X-rays, injury-related services, stitches, or they had to set a bone or something, or specialty consultations that might be needed for a follow-up. Okay, I'm trying to change the slide. Okay, so what's important is, it's important to know, so as we said, the first thing you want to know when you're working with any client, but particularly with an immigrant victim, is anything included in the rape kit in your state will be included, will be covered for payment if it's part of the kit, okay? And so what's important is we have charts where we track by state that we're making available to you through this webinar, where you can see what is covered in the forensic exam in each state, what the statutory basis for the laws that govern that clarify that there's no immigration status restrictions on getting the rape kit covered. It explained what the state charts explain what costs and services are covered and how key terms are defined in each state, and the forensic exam application process, and then any notice, reporting, and record-keeping requirements. Now, this chart that we have that was just published like this week, we have available on our website. Maybe, Sarah, you put the link in the chat. We want to thank Morgan Lewis, the law firm of Morgan Lewis that worked on this for a number of years and has recently updated for this webinar. Corin, maybe this would be a good opportunity for you to talk about the charts and materials you have on your website as well.
Yeah, so I'm going to put some links in the chat to our resources on safeta.org. We have a page on there that covers all exam payment related resources and information. We have a really good resource. It's a state-by-state map resource that gives all information on the process of medical forensic exam payment and reimbursement for that state. So I'm going to put those links in.
Okay. Thank you, Corin. And I want to answer, I think it's Ariane's question about, so this chart, we have a series, new app has a series, and I'll show you the list of them, of different healthcare charts. One is forensic medical exam. One is post-assault healthcare, so where immigrants can go, victims of trafficking, sexual assault, domestic violence, strangulation can go to get healthcare covered costs, post-assault healthcare costs covered. And at the end of this webinar, we're going to show you a link to we have an online public benefits map that will explain what additional public benefits and services an immigrant survivor of any of these crimes qualifies for: domestic violence, sexual assault, strangulation, human trafficking, child abuse, dating violence, all of that. And what's interesting is the reason we had to do this, and our charts and we have a chart and a map, also includes all the citations, is that what an immigrant survivor qualifies for that is not covered in the rape kit or the medical forensic exam kit payment, where somebody can go for services, healthcare services, and get them paid for, if they're an immigrant, varies. There's certain things open to everybody without regard to immigration status, and I'll go over those. But beyond that, whether they can buy health insurance, whether they qualify for subsidized health care or mental health care, varies by state and by immigration status. So we have a way for you to look it up for each survivor you're working with, whether they're a survivor of sexual assault and human trafficking, domestic violence, all of it. Okay. So now we're going to move I'm going to go into more detail about the options for covering, healthcare costs for immigrant survivors of sexual assault. So first thing, true or false? Another poll, Mari-Kate. And this one is it true or false? Immigrant survivors of sexual assault must be lawfully present to be eligible to purchase health insurance through the state and federal healthcare exchanges. Is this true or false? And feel free to guess. Okay, we've got wait until there's about 70% of you. Come on, a few more of you going to try to guess or choose. Okay, I think we're going to close the poll. Great, we hit 70%, share the results. So 70% of you said it's false and 30% of you said it's true. The answer is it's true. A wealthy immigrant who's on a student visa or a work visa or a diplomatic visa who might be on vacation in the United States, unless they have a particular or an immigrant in the United States, it doesn't matter. You have to be considered lawfully present in the United States in order to purchase healthcare. So you could afford to be able to purchase healthcare, but you're not allowed to under the Affordable Care Act unless you have one of the statuses that is covered, that is eligible to get coverage. So I'm going to give you an idea of what those look for. Sarah, maybe you can find, I wrote a chart on lawfully present, the list of everybody who's lawfully present. Maybe you can put a link to that in the chat while we're talking. Okay, wait. So some examples of people who are lawfully present for purposes of purchasing health. This is who's able to purchase healthcare. Lawful permanent residents, asylees and refugees, Violence Against Women Act applicants for VAWA self-petitioning or VAWA cancellation, children who are filed for special immigrant juvenile status, trafficking victims have a good amount of access provided they are identified and they file a T visa case and get a bona fide determination. The bona fide determinations are going to begin to be made by the Department of Homeland Security in T visa cases this month. So it's newly implemented bona fide determination process. Trafficking victims who get continued presence are eligible to purchase healthcare on the exchange. And a child trafficking victim who's identified before they turn the age of 19 and referred to HHS, Office of Trafficking in Persons, for to make a referral that you believe this child may be a victim of human trafficking. Children with OTIP letters, Office of Trafficking in Persons letters, are immediately eligible to purchase healthcare on the exchange and for subsidized healthcare. People with deferred action, DACA children, VAWA self-petitioners, U visa bona fide. There might also be people with cases, the Department of Labor, the EEOC have deferred action. People might be working with immigrants with temporary protected status or humanitarian parole. And then here, if you have certain work visas or certain kinds of visas, fiance visas, diplomats, students, work visas are eligible for purchasing health insurance. Okay. I'm looking to see what's in the chat. So if they can't purchase health insurance, period, does that mean they're just prohibited from the subsidy? Yes. So if you can't purchase through the exchange, you can't get the subsidy through the exchange. So let's go on to talk about where, so when you talk about, I'm going to skip the slide here. Okay. So what happens is that immigrants may have access to medical insurance or subsidy, but only lawfully present immigrants can purchase on the exchange. And crime victimization, as I mentioned earlier, can lead to lawful presence, meaning that once somebody has been a victim of sexual assault, domestic violence, human trafficking, stalking, dating violence, child abuse in the United States, they are likely eligible for a form of immigration relief that will put them on a path where they can ultimately purchase health insurance and maybe get subsidies, but there can be long wait times to that. And so immigrants need no-cost options while their immigration cases are pending or before they filed for immigration relief. And so let's talk about where immigrant victims of sexual assault, domestic violence, human trafficking, child abuse can get free healthcare. So I'm going to ask you first, where can immigrant survivors receive healthcare that is subsidized without regard to their legal status? Anybody have any idea? I know there's some nurses on here that see, charities is one idea. What kind of local health department? Yes. Emergency, if it's emergency Medicaid. Biggest example of emergency Medicaid, federally qualified health clinics. Absolutely. So HHS funded federally qualified community health clinics, primary care clinics, free health clinics are open to everyone without regard to whether they insurance, without regard to whether they have immigration status, etc. And they're a great place to get healthcare. And I'll be talking about that. Drop-in clinics. Excellent. What about, anybody have an answer regarding mental health care? Ideas where you'd go to get emergency mental health care? It turns out that there are SAMHSA-funded community mental health clinics that are open without regard to immigration status, in the same way federally qualified health centers and nonprofits and all of those are. So it's okay. So we're going to go to the next slide. So let me go through. So emergency Medicaid is available to anybody without regard to immigration status. And this is going to cover health care that is related to stabilizing a patient's health, which is in serious jeopardy. The most common way immigrant victims, the most common thing immigrant victims access, never mind. I'm not going to give you the answer to that because it's coming up. I gave you a quiz. So think of this definition. It has to be something that causes a dysfunction may cause dysfunction of a bodily organ or part, may cause serious impairment to bodily functions, or put somebody's health in jeopardy. And it included COVID-19 testing and treatment. So we have another interactive exercise for you. And that is, check all that apply. Which of these do you think would be covered by emergency Medicaid? We have another poll. Okay, so this one is a multiple choice question. So you're going to check everything that you think is covered by emergency Medicaid. Okay, good. I'll give you a few more, about 30 more seconds. So far, I have about half of you participating. Let's bring along the other half. Check all that apply. Anybody else? We're up to 60%. A few more of you. It's getting to 60 or 70% with this group. Takes a little bit of time. Come on, a few more. Almost there. 63%. One more person, maybe? Okay, I think we're going to share the response. Okay, and so what you see, so basically, so 92% of you said a gunshot or stabbing wound. Absolutely true, it's covered. Broken arm or leg. Absolutely true, 75% of you, it's covered. Childbirth is covered, but prenatal care is not. So prenatal care isn't a danger to a bodily injury or part, basically. It doesn't fit under emergency Medicaid. Now, another thing we have, and we'll share this post-webinar unless Sarah can find it in the meantime, is we have an emergency Medicaid chart where you can look up state by state what is considered emergency Medicaid in your state and see what immigrants qualify therefore. All victims qualify for that. Okay, thank you, Mary Kate. Okay, so did I skip a slide? I did, I think. There we go. So how do you find, so this is how you find community health clinics, the federally qualified health centers. You can go to either of these websites, put in your client's zip code, and it will tell you the HHS funded federally qualified health centers within your community. We also have charts. So the other thing is that in every state but Alabama, immigrant victims are eligible for post-assault health care in terms of, basically to get VOCA pay for any post-assault health care that they have out-of-pocket expenses related to beyond the forensic exam. Immunization testing and treatment of communicable diseases is covered everywhere without regard to immigration status and emergency Medicaid. Next slide, please. So the kinds of services that will be provided at the community federally qualified health clinics are these. This is a short list of them, but it includes diagnostic and rate. So all of the CAT scans and the MRIs and I can't remember what else is on the list that you were talking about. The x-rays can be taken at the community health clinics and they will be covered post. So for example, if somebody has an NPEP and does the first, your rape kit covers the first, their pills, right, Corin? If I remember correctly, the first.
Yes, you're correct. The first dose.
Most
places and most states will cover the first dose.
Okay. Yeah. So for the doses after that, you can go to the community health clinic and get the prescription and get it filled there. They do STI testing, injury treatment. They do screening for domestic violence and human trafficking. Emergency medical and dental services. They provide prenatal care, immunizations. They have pharmaceutical services, mental health treatment. And you can find on the HHS websites where this is all available. And so in addition, there's something called Hill-Burton. I actually probably remember when this became law. It's a long time ago. But there was a Hill-Burton bill in Congress many decades ago that paid for the construction of hospitals and healthcare facilities. And so you can look up on the HHS website for the list of Hill-Burton affiliated organizations in each region. And that will tell you who provides free or low-cost healthcare and is another great option for clients that don't have access to healthcare subsidies. And this is a list from SAMHSA. So just as we talked about physical health treatment, this is mental health treatment. And so SAMHSA funds treatment centers, certified community mental health clinics that are available free of charge to people without regard to insurance, without regard to immigration status, who are income eligible. And there are also things like the National Sexual Assault Resource Center, Reliance, RAIN, domestic violence hotlines, the Polaris human trafficking hotline. All of those things are available free of charge to everybody without regard to immigration status. So, but then what's really important, as I mentioned earlier, is when you are dealing with a victim who is getting, and we will be sharing the slides, they're already posted on our website, and the slides and the recording will also be available on the IAFN website. So yes, you'll all receive them post after the training. So this tool will also be, we'll make sure it's on the webpage. It's, how would I put this, alive. You can see, if you look closely, you can see there's a little links in the thing. And if you click on U-Visa, it will take you to the webpage of the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services webpage on U-Visas. If you need a certification form, you click on the black boxes and you can get the application forms for any of these forms of immigration relief. But what happens is that so what I'm going to say is, and I'll show you a list in a minute, that any victim who qualifies, any immigrant who's a victim of any of the next list I'm going to show you of crime, which includes all kinds of sexual assault offenses and domestic violence and human trafficking and child abuse, but many more, will qualify for one of these forms of immigration relief. So for example, special immigrant juvenile status, if you have a child victim of rape and the rape was perpetrated by their father, let's say, a parent, if you have a parent perpetrated rape in the United States or abroad, that child is eligible for special immigrant juvenile status. Any child who's abused, abandoned, or neglected by a parent is eligible. VAWA self-petitions help people. You may see patients where the abuser is a U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident spouse, former spouse, parent, or step-parent of a child or a spouse. If that's true, that person qualifies for a VAWA self-petition. T visas are for victims of human trafficking perpetrated in the United States, sex or labor, and U visas are for victims of all kinds of other crimes perpetrated in the United States, but including human trafficking, domestic violence, child abuse, sexual assault, whole range of sexual assault cases. And what's interesting is when victims file for either a T visa or a U visa, being more examples, if they make a police report, if they learn from having met an advocate and being willing to go through the forensic exam, if they take the forensic exam and they're willing and they get information from the SANE nurse or from the advocate involved in the exam, and they learn that these forms of immigration relief are available, the victims' cases are stronger if they're willing to make a police report. And so there's balance there that you should be aware of. And the crimes that are covered are this list. So it covers all of the domestic violence and sexual assault crimes, child abuse, elder abuse, trafficking and stalking, and a range of other criminal activities, hate crimes, and things like that. Does a survivor have to report to law enforcement in order to receive benefits, but if the survivor wishes to remain anonymous? Okay, that's exactly the issue I'm talking about. So for a U visa or a T visa case to go forward, the new T visa regs say that some kind of a report of the trafficking has to be made, usually to law enforcement, could be to a prosecutor, it has to be to a government agency, might be to a court, protection order proceeding or something like that. U visa victims have to show helpfulness to a government agency. That could be reporting the sexual assault to the EEOC, but not to law enforcement. So if it's workplace-based sexual assault, they're reported to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, that would count. It doesn't have to be to law enforcement, but it typically is to law enforcement. And an anonymous report could be complex for a U visa applicant, but there are some exceptions. But the problem is you have to show some level of initial helpfulness. Taking the exam could qualify for that. And so supporting victims through this decision-making process who are survivors of sexual assault is a challenge. And it's one of the things we encourage you to provide them full information, so they're not making the information about whether they want the report to be anonymous without being fully informed about the connection between making a non-anonymous police report and immigration relief that may follow. There are some exceptions, which I'll talk about. So how do survivors benefit, next poll, from the process of applying for and gaining legal immigration status? So Mary Kate, we're going to do another poll. Okay, and okay, we're doing the poll, and then I'll get to Elizabeth. We were definitely getting to your question. It's a little bit further on. We're going to get to it a little bit further on in the webinar. Okay, so we have about 30% of you so far. This is in multiple choice, so check all that apply. How do people benefit when they learn about and are connected with and start applying for immigration relief? Got about almost 50% of you. I'm going to give you like 10, 20 more seconds. Okay. I think we're good. Let's end the poll and share the results. Okay, so greater access to health insurance and subsidies. That is true, that once a victim begins applying for immigration status, over time, their access to healthcare subsidies and health insurance grows. But how long it takes for that to happen varies dramatically between immigration cases. Some cases, the VAWA self-petition, for example, the people abused by their U.S. citizen, lawful permanent resident spouses or parents, 3 months after filing. Special immigrant juvenile status children who were sexually assaulted or abused by a parent, immediately after filing. U visa victims, 3 to 5 years after filing. So there's a big difference. And for some places in many states, once you become eligible to purchase healthcare on the exchange, it could be for U visa victims decades before they're eligible for subsidies, which is why the public health clinics are so important. As to, so the next highest one I see is access to legal immigration status. That's correct. Which comes with protection from deportation. As soon as they file a VAWA T or U visa immigration case, they get some initial protection from deportation, particularly from tips that their perpetrators might try to call immigration and get them removed. They have an ability in the VAWA self-petition, the U visas and the T visa cases to include their children. Special immigrant juvenile status children cannot include their parents. So it's the children only. And in U and T visa cases, they can include some siblings. And every form of immigration relief enhances the victim's path to financial independence, because it comes, in addition to some greater access to benefits, it comes with legal work authorization. And again, the wait for work authorization runs between 6 or 8 months to 5 years, depending on the case type. Okay, excellent. And Elizabeth, I'm going to get to your question when I get to it in the slides, and Sarah will make sure I don't forget to ask to get there. And this is a summary of what I basically said, is that you can see how long, so healthcare exchange access comes fairly quickly, really quickly. For trafficking victims, VAWA self-petitioners, and special immigrant juvenile status, it takes 3 to 5 years for U visas. Subsidies for children and for pregnant persons come the fastest, meaning the most number of states provide subsidies to healthcare for prenatal care, for care for pregnant persons, and for children who are lawfully present. Adult health care, direct access is basically only trafficking victims and VAWA self-petitioners. only in 9 states. In other states, they have, most volatile petitioners have to wait 5 years to get adult non-health care for somebody who's not pregnant. Again, which is why access to the public health systems is so important. And so I put this in because what's really important to understand is that I think somebody made a comment that it's sad, that these wait times are sad. And yeah, and it sometimes can feel hopeless. And I don't want you to walk away from this webinar feeling hopeless, because that's the wrong thing to be. Because what's important to understand is, if you identify a victim and you refer them to a program in your community, and Sarah, we're going to share a link to our directory and put it in the follow-up email as well, is that if you identify somebody and that they learn from you or from the advocate you refer them to about legal immigration status that they have a path to because of their sexual assault, we find that by the time the victim gets protection from deportation, called deferred action and work authorization, there is a 114% chance, greater chance, they're willing to trust the police and participate in a criminal case. 36% of them report future crimes. So trafficking victims, domestic violence victims, child abuse victims. Some of them are crimes against themselves or their children, but other crimes that they're seeing in the community. And most important, 22% of them, and you guys as nurses have probably seen this in a lot of different ways, 22% of them bring other women in the community forward to seek help from the justice system, from the nurse examiner, from, they trust you and they begin to bring others forward. The other thing is it makes a dramatic difference in their own mental health. It's easier for them to make decisions. They sleep better. They're calmer. They're more focused. They're more independent. They're less depressed. And I can't underestimate how important that is in terms of the survivor's ability to heal. So it's really important to not lose sight that once, even if it seems, that they don't have access to subsidized healthcare, they can turn their lives around in other ways, get work authorization, and it makes a super important difference. We get into, in more detail, all of the public benefits and services that immigrants qualify for, both without regard to immigration status and once they begin applying for immigration status, in the other 2 webinars that IAFN and NUAP partnered on as part of the Safe TA. And Corinne, I think you put that Safe TA link in the chat earlier.
Yes, I put the link to safeta.org. That's the main page that you'll go to. And from the top bar under webinars, you can go in and we upload all of our webinars that we present, including this one. Give us about 2 weeks for this one to go on to the website, but all of our previous webinars you'll find from SafeTA.
Great. So, and I encourage you to watch those webinars, and they will give you more information. And we also have a lot of information about, if you want to just learn more about immigrant victims and public benefits access, we have other links on our website as to other webinars as well. So now let's talk about, back to the rape kits, and let's talk about who pays for a rape kit when the rape occurs in one state and the exam is conducted in another state. Anybody want to try to answer that in the chat? So imagine, again, you have a student who's going to school in your state. They go to another part of the country to visit friends, experience a rape, come back home and have the rape kit done in your state. Okay, so somebody says no one. The state where the crime occurred, where the assault happened, victims' compensation is generally paid from the state where the crime occurred and state where the exam occurred. And we're seeing both. Somebody says they eat the costs. States should work together to make sure that the payment is made. Okay. Good answers. Okay. Who pays? So, in a significant majority of states, basically the state where the rape kit is performed is the state that pays for the rape kit. And most state pay for rape kits when the assault occurred in their state, or the rape kit was the forensic medical exam was, or the medical forensic exam was performed in their state, and that states work out the conflicts to include, because of VAWA, states are required to work out the conflicts to make sure that the victim isn't caught in the middle and the out-of-pocket costs aren't paid. So Corin, could you explain to people what happens, like, if a lot of people said the state where the crime occurred. So if you're working, let's say you do a forensic medical exam in Maryland and another state is interested in that test, what happens?
So pretty much with that situation where you just described, you really want to work with the jurisdiction that is going to process the rape kit. So if you perform the medical forensic exam in your state and the assault occurred in another state, even though VAWA does say that the state who performs the exam is responsible for payment, but it's unless another state is willing to take over that payment. And most states will if they are the ones that are going to perform the investigation because the assault occurred in their state, or they're the ones that are going to process the rape kit. The key to that is, though, because the statute pretty much says states have to work it out. And so the key thing to that is collaboration and with other states. And what I found just in researching and doing a lot of asking around, a lot of the departments or the agencies in those states who are responsible for making the decision to pay are really good at wanting to work it out because their main focus is for the survivors. So sometimes just reaching out and letting them know, hey, this happened, and having the conversation, they're very easy to work with, and they want to have those conversations. And then, like I said, because they're bound by the law, by VAWA, to work it out.
Right. So that basically the state that performs the kit either pays or arranges that it gets paid by someone. So that's what has to happen. Somebody asked a question, and when we talk about rape, we're talking about the medical forensic exam, correct, Corin? That it's the exam and what has to be covered according in that exam as part of the medical forensic exam. That's what we're talking about. VAWA,
yeah,
controlling how it gets paid for. I get that right?
Yeah. So the medical forensic exam includes the rape kit. Most states include in what is included in the medical forensic exam the actual rape kit. So that's the kit with the swabs. That's the actual box that the police take and that they process. So that is included in the medical forensic exam. Some states do separate, so they'll separate forensic. For example, Texas separates forensic and medical. So forensic is the rape kit portion and things that go with that, and then outside of the rape kit, the medical portions is separate. So
okay,
if that made that sense a little bit.
Right. So I think I was just, so what's important is that we're talking about medical forensic exam, and everything that's included in that is covered by VAWA, has to be paid by the state where it's performed, or that state has to arrange with another state to pick up the cost. It doesn't go to the victim. Somebody says, what if the patient doesn't have the kit completed? Then I think, again, Corin, you can help me with this, but what happens there is that I don't think there's payment for a medical forensic exam if somebody isn't willing to have the rape kit done, correct?
Correct. So some states are even real specific in saying that if there's no evidence collection, that they don't include that as part of the medical forensic exam. So, and that it gets a little tricky with that because, again, every state is different. Some states, they'll allow for the survivor to only do maybe a partial, they're able to decline some parts of the rape kit. And then you have some states that say all portions of the rape kit must be used to be included in the medical forensic exam payments.
So
That's
that's
one of the tricky
the
things
tricky
about
parts
it.
of, which is why going to IAFN's website and looking at the instructions of the information they've collected about what's paid for and what's not, and what has to be done and what's not in each state is really important. And knowing your state law. So when you're talking about immigrants or any victim, if this issue about the victim not being charged for the medical forensic exam means that the evidence collection that happens, or the exam that takes place, legally fits the term medical forensic exam in that state, right? And whatever the parts, and if somebody can decline this part and still qualify, that's fine, but it follows those state rules. And immigrants have to follow the same rules as everyone else. And if right. Did you want to say something else, Corinne?
Yeah, I just wanted to, she clarified a question. She asked, is if the evidence kit is required. What I will say is what is required by the law, that there is some form of evidence collection being done inside the medical forensic exam. So I would say yes on that one. It is required that there's some form of evidence collection being performed. And usually that encompasses what the kit is.
Right.
I hope that was clear or clarified that for you.
It's very helpful. And again,
as said, boo, yeah.
And so what happens is, if the people don't follow through on the full things that are covered in, that they don't do each of the pieces that is required by that state to have the medical forensic exam paid for, then it's not going to be paid for because it doesn't meet the definition of a medical forensic exam in that state. And that's what governs it. And that's why using our tools, which have the law, and IAFN's tool map, which you can see what's covered in each state, are so important. As to immigrants, if so what happens is who pays, if it doesn't meet the definition, or as to everyone, if it doesn't meet the definition of medical forensic exam, then VAWA doesn't require it to be paid. And that's kind of where we are. So as to the question that I think it was Elizabeth who asked earlier, I want to get back to that. So what happens when the sexual assault occurred in another country or state where the rape did not occur, right? The answer under VAWA is that the state where the medical forensic exam is performed pays for the exam with no out-of-pocket cost to the victim. And so let's think about what would be an example. You could have, like, okay, I'm in DC, right? Let's say a student at my university where I work went on vacation to Montreal or Paris or Mexico City and suffered a rape, got back on the plane and went to get her forensic exam, right after getting off the plane here in the US. Then I'm in DC. So DC would pay the hospital for that forensic exam unless there was another, as Corinne was explaining, another state agency that is interested in that kit. And then when you have a foreign country, chances are you're not going to have another entity interested in that kit. Although it has happened, it's not common at all. But the point is if it's being performed in your state, the victim is entitled to have it performed in your state and no out-of-pocket costs. Okay, hopefully that answers the question. So, and please keep your questions coming in. This is excellent. So let's talk about, is there a resource out there to include with discharge instruction in multiple languages? There's so much fear involved in possible threats. Okay, so we are in the process, NUAP is in the process of translating a core set of Know Your Rights materials into multiple languages. What I can say is we can talk, it's not a project, so we have a little bit of private funding for this. And maybe Corin will talk to you at IFN and see if there's something, have you look at what we're already translating and see if there might be something additional that we could translate that would help, fill in a gap that we have, so that these might be things. As to immigration relief, we're translating Department of Homeland Security brochures that into other languages that you could give to immigrant clients. So as to this question, we were prepared for this, Elizabeth, about people who are raped on the way to the United States, or, so what happens is that, again, the state, according to VAWA, the state where the rape kit performed is the state that pays, unless there's another jurisdiction that can pay. As to VOCA funding, like for VOCA coverage for other costs, what would happen is in most states, immigrants are eligible for VOCA coverage if they're victims of crime that happened in that state. And there's some that they cover, there's ways that VOCA will cover, and I think I probably have some slides for this someplace. What happens in another state. So, and some of it has to turn on residence. So, but residence is not lawful permanent residence or legal immigration status. Residence is residence in the state that is used for civil court proceedings or divorce proceedings, and each state will be different. So, for example, in Texas, residence is 90 days in a county or 6 months in the state. That would determine whether they're eligible for VOCA assistance in the state, or the crime, if the crime didn't happen in Texas. If it happened in Texas, they're eligible. Okay. Okay, I think that's, okay. So now I want to talk about, I want to be sure, because I've been focusing on what's not covered. I want to show you what is covered. So what happens is there's a range of services that your immigrant sexual assault survivor clients are eligible for without regard to immigration status. So adult and child protective services, crisis counseling and intervention, violence and abuse prevention, victim assistance. And we're talking about victim assistance for victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, dating violence, stalking, child abuse, human trafficking, all strangulation, all of the different kinds of things we've been talking about in this webinar. Treatment of mental illnesses and substance abuse necessary to protect life and safety. That's the urgent, like somebody who urgently needs, let's say, suicide prevention or treatment. Help during adverse weather conditions. Those are like, hurricanes and floods that we're all hearing and seeing about now. Whoops, did I change? Okay. Community food banks. Shelter and transitional housing are open to everybody without regard to immigration status, as are nutritional programs for those requiring special assistance. In addition, any victim of any crime that was covered, that big list I showed you earlier. How did my camera go off? I'm very sorry. I have a new camera and it has a mind of its own. Okay, sorry about that. Any victim is eligible, who's a victim of domestic violence, sexual assault, dating violence, stalking, child abuse, elder abuse, sexual, human trafficking, and any of those crimes listed on that sheet I showed you earlier that are U visa crimes are eligible for legal services. They can get, divorce or protection orders. They have language access, police assistance, they can get custody of their children, user can be criminally prosecuted. They can apply as somebody who's undocumented for benefits their children qualify for without being asked any questions or have to answer any questions about their own status or their own social security numbers. They can get a GED, they can go to WIC programs, primary and secondary education, emergency Medicaid, immunizations, rape kits, and help from community health clinics, and by and large, most places, VOCA. And what's really important about this is they can't get turned away from a community health clinic or from from legal services. VAWA, there, as to legal services representation, the anti-abuse laws govern eligibility. And so, and we're going to be later on in the fall, I think we're going to be doing a whole webinar on legal services access. So what are the options post-exam to cover healthcare costs, other healthcare costs related to an immigrant sexual assault survivor's healthcare and mental health care needs? So as to, so what happens is as to benefits access, once you get beyond what everybody's eligible for without regard to immigration status, actually, I'm going to pause because I saw the cyber stalking question. Let me try to answer that before I dive in here. So any stalking that qualifies as stalking under state laws, and federal laws, which I believe the last VAWA it was expanded to include cyber stalking. So stalking would be those services that are available as well. So stalking includes all kinds of stalking. And we have one of the tools we have available, if you're interested in more about stalking and stalking and immigrants in particular, we've developed a really good brochure with Spark that is the TA provider on stalking that we can provide you as well. Is there a specific? Okay, as to language access, we just recorded a webinar and collected with the Department of Justice's experts on language access. We were focusing on language access to the courts, and we collected all of the information, really good resources in terms of language access information. But one of the things we can look into, Sarah, I'll have my Dean's Fellow work with me on this, is getting you the law on language access in the healthcare settings, regarding from HHS, as well as what we've gathered from DOJ. So, okay. And it looks like, and then one of the people in the audience says the Joint Commission CMS requires interpreting services in healthcare entities, and that's correct. And we'll find the link and send it to you. So going back to what services and assistance like immigrants qualify for beyond what's legally open to everyone. So what happens is, and this kind of draws it out for you, as a crime victim, a victim of sexual assault, she's done the medical forensic exam, it included the rape kit, she had her first dose of NPEP, I get that right, Corin? And she now needs to find a place to get the ongoing healthcare services. Once a victim, on the left-hand side, victims are, if you're a qualified immigrants are eligible not only to purchase healthcare on this stage, but eligible for state healthcare subsidies. So the generally, and sometimes there's waiting periods, we'll talk about that in a minute, but generally, in order to qualify at all, and certainly to purchase healthcare on the exchange, and there's no wait for that, you have to be a lawful permanent resident, an asylee or a refugee, a VAWA self-petitioner, a trafficking victim with one of these three things. And victims are always eligible to apply for benefits that their children qualify for. So you might have a victim of sexual assault who's undocumented, sexual assault in the workplace, who's applying for a U visa. So she's got some wait until she can get a subsidy herself, but her children, if they're US citizens or other crime victims and have their own path to legal status, a parent can go in and apply for their child, which helps stabilize the victim because you have money coming in and subsidies coming in through the child. The people who are generally not eligible for benefits, and it varies by state, are asylum applicants, children who are DACA recipients, and I'm assuming you see DACA recipients in your SANE practices and coming in for medical forensic exams, U visa holders and applicants, student visas, work visa holders, and people who are undocumented. And so what's also important is once somebody's a qualified immigrant, so even among those, let's say you're working with somebody who's a lawful permanent resident or a VAWA self-petitioner or a trafficking victim, which benefits they get and whether they have a 5-year wait to that healthcare subsidy depends on their immigration status. So trafficking victims actually have the least wait. They have some wait to get that status, but once they get it, they don't have to wait an additional 5 years. Whereas lawful permanent residents may have a 5-year wait, but children won't, and pregnant persons won't have that 5-year wait in 35 states or 23 to 35 states. It also matters when they enter the United States. So somebody who entered before 1996 will have greater access to subsidized healthcare than somebody who entered after 1996. So you might think it's old people like me, and that's true, it could be. But it also could be, I don't know, I'm not doing my math. 96 was how many years ago? 30? Something? 28? So you young people, you know, somebody who's over 28 or 29, whatever the math is, could be eligible, could have been here since they were 1. And they would be in this group that has more access. So you want to be sure over a certain age you're screening people because they may have been here and may have come in as children. What programs? So each different kind of public benefit. So whether TANF is different than healthcare subsidies, is different than housing, is different than post-secondary educational grants and loans. So which only certain programs are the hardest to get, and I put them in red. So the ones that are hardest to get in most states are Medicaid, subsidized healthcare, CHIP, TANF, SSI, and food stamps. Other things come faster. And each state has the ability to decide what public benefits they get. So I know it sounds incredibly confusing, but to make it less confusing, we created a public benefits map. So I'm going to ask, hold on. Oh yeah. So we have a public benefits map. It looks like this, and where you can look up by state what an immigrant survivor will qualify for in terms of post-exam costs of healthcare in your state. And I'm going to ask Sarah, do I stop sharing, or does Mary Kate stop sharing and you share? We're going to give you a little demonstration of the map. Okay. So what we're going to use, so this is what the benefits map looks for. Can you make it a little bit smaller? Or no, leave it the same size because we're going to need it bigger. So why don't we take it as an example, New Mexico. So this is what the benefits map is. You click on New Mexico and you'll see that you get a paragraph about New Mexico. The New Mexico chart actually we just updated, so it's actually current as of August 2024. We're in the process of updating all of our charts right now. And for every state, we have 2 things. We have a screening chart. You want to click on that one first? Okay. So you'll land on a landing page and then you'll come to this. This was updated in July. And we summarize at the top of the map. So for a quick reference, in New Mexico, you can immediately see if you're talking about healthcare, that New Mexico is a state that provides some subsidized healthcare in CHIP and the Medicaid programs to immigrants with state funding. So that's where you want to start, because that says, oh, okay, I'm going to refer this client for further healthcare. New Mexico may be a place where they can get some more. So then you go down and we have we summarize who's eligible for what by state. And on the left-hand side, don't click on it because I don't want to jump to other websites, but these underlined things on the left-hand side all go to the application where you apply in the state for that program. Okay, so Sarah, let's go back to the map. Okay, one more. There we go. We have to go to New Mexico again. And in addition, we also have a chart with all of the details. I don't know, I guess we could show you. Yeah, there we go. And this is a full public benefits chart. And what's interesting, it covers naturalized citizens, lawful permanent residents, refugees, asylees, and it has Can you go down to the healthcare section? There we go. Here we go. So it deals with the healthcare exchanges and who's eligible. CHIP, who's eligible in the state. And if you look in the italics in New Mexico, you can see that qualified children, there we go. Children and pregnant persons and people who are abused are eligible for state-funded Medicaid in New Mexico. And this is how you find it. And if you go all the way to the end, these are monster cases that my students have helped them with for years. Keep going all the way in. You have all the citations. So you can get all the legal citations if you need them. They're here. Okay, now go back. And then we have a screening chart. So you don't have to dig into the details. Go back to New Mexico, and we're going to go to the bottom now. The screening chart pops up like this. And can you go to the larger version, please? Bottom right. View larger version. Yep, there we go. And so for every, oops, what happened? There we go. For every state here, you can see in the benefit name, you can see all of the different public benefits. And then you can go across and it's broken down by every, you want to shift to the right? Yeah. Every kind of immigration status you can imagine. And we did this. So let's pause here for a second. So for example, if you look at health insurance exchanges and you look at DACA kids here, you can see they're not eligible. So if they're not eligible, you stop. You don't have to dig into the maps. It tells you who's eligible, who's not eligible, and who might be eligible. Okay? So if you go to, let me take the Medicaid again. Where's Medicaid? If you go, click on special immigrant juvenile status, please, down to Medicaid. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. Almost, a couple more. Yes, click there and click the open up. There we go. And you can see that a special immigrant juvenile, so a child who's, let's say, a rape victim who's applied for special immigrant juvenile status in New Mexico, they would have to wait until they are a lawful permanent resident. Unless they are a child abuse victim, in which case the state will fund it, or a battered immigrant. But this gives you a shortcut of how to look up who would qualify for what in your state. Okay. I think we can close now. And you can look it up by immigration status. Okay. Mari Kate, can I have my slides back, please? Okay, so where are we? We're on VOCA, right? I think, just want to see where we are here. I lost, there we go, oops. There we go. So, additional resources, we have state by state. In addition to those resources, we also have a forensic exam chart. Can we show them that, Sarah? Because we have a little bit more time. So Corinne, I can do a little more show and tell. Okay. So this one's hot off the press. The law firm just updated this. They've been tracking this for us. They started this the first time in, I can't remember, 2015 or something, long time ago. Actually, no, they started this in 2012, I think, or 10. And so we just had this updated, and you go down, and what you can see in our chart, and go down to kind of towards the middle, like go to down to Delaware or something. Connecticut's good. That's good. So for each state, you look, it tells you whether or not, what requirements on the left, can you, oops. Yeah, I can't see that. Go back to the, can you go to the top of the columns? I'm sorry. There we go. So it tells you jurisdiction, the eligibility, whether there's, income, law enforcement cooperation, time period requirements, what's covered in the exam, what falls within the exam, what's the application process, and what are the notice, law enforcement and record, the notice to the victim and any law enforcement and record keeping requirements. Now just go down towards the middle again, maybe go back to Connecticut or Delaware or something, Florida. Colorado's good. We'll stop there. And then you can see we provided all the detailed information. And so using this chart together with the web map that Corin has, that the IAFN has, are the two tools you need to get your exam payments covered and to know what's covered in your state vis-a-vis the state next door. So you might have somebody who went to visit, let's take Illinois and Madison again. You know, they may differ. Illinois and Wisconsin may differ in what they cover. And so an advocate may help get the rate kit done in the state where the sexual assault happened, as opposed to where they live, if there's a difference in coverage and they're an immigrant, and it may mean one more is covered in one state than the other. But that's not going to come up a lot, but it could. Okay, thanks for sharing, Sarah. Mary Kate. And so, and then we also have state by state similar charts on what's covered by emergency Medicaid, how you get how an immigrant gets prenatal care or child health care covered, what is covered in the state by immigration status, and what do they need to go to, you know, public health clinics for, and then what VOCA funds in each state varies by state, and we've tracked all of that as part of our post-assault healthcare chart. Next slide, please. And I think that brings us to our technical assistance, and we have got like 10 more minutes if people want to ask other questions. Can you provide the links to the documents in the chat? So what we're going to do after, oh, thank you. What we're going to do after the, can you go back one slide for a second? Yeah. So what we're going to do after the webinar as to terms of materials, this is where you call us for technical assistance. This is the link. I think it actually is a slightly different. We put them all on one page. So we'll redirect this link to the link that Sarah put in the chat for this webinar. And then also I want to talk a little bit about, and can I email? I'm getting bombarded. Right. So any questions you have, I can speak for ourselves. As to NewApp, you can call this number or email this info@newapp.org. That is our TA intake number. And we have law students, men and womaning that 5 days a week, law students and undergraduate students. And so we will get back to you with the questions and happy to answer them. Corin, do you want to take a second and explain IAFN's technical assistance as well?
Sure. So I also re-entered in the links to safetya.org. So on safetya.org, we have a ask a question now, so you can contact us. And we usually get back within 24 hours. We also have a new way to access forensic nurses, and it's on our forensicnurses.org site, and I'll put that information in there. But we have an Ask a Nurse button on that main page, and it's you put your question in, and we reach right back out to you. So it can be any questions. For me, the questions related to payment and reimbursement, those actually come straight to me. So and you can put your questions in on safetya.org or in the Ask a Nurse button, and I'll put that into the chat.
And what we'll do is make sure that between us and Corin at IFN, we're going to make sure that after the webinar, all of you who attended and all of you that registered will receive an email that has all of the links to all of these materials. The additional materials that we may not have posted on our page today that came up in the discussion, we will add all of those. All these new materials are there for you to support you in this work. So part of this is to, let you know what great, rich training and technical assistance both IAFN and NewApp offer to support your work. You're not out there, you don't have to guess. And we also, for those of you that are victim advocates, we have a victim advocates community of practice that we run, or if you're working with family lawyers, we have a family lawyer community of practice. And what these are, they meet monthly or bi-monthly, and they're peer-to-peer learning opportunities. And we also do their 1 hour, they're all virtual. And we also do ongoing continuing education through them. So whatever people want to learn, my job or my staff's job is to present on that or find a speaker who can present on it so that we're constantly continuing to answer questions and continuing to learn how we can better serve you in the field. Random question. If an undocumented person is pregnant and delivers their baby, does that mean that the child has US citizenship? Yes. So any child born in the United States is a US citizen. It does not mean that the parent necessarily anytime for at least 21 years or more will have a path to legal status through the child. So a lot of people get confused about that. They think if you have a US citizen child, you can become a US citizen. You have a path. That's not true. But all the crime victims that you work with, that you encounter in your forensic nursing work, who are victims of child abuse, trafficking, sexual assault, stalking, dating violence, all of that will have one or more of these paths to legal status open to them. And lastly, I guess the last point I wanted to make is this is our bigger, we have a web library resource that is available to all of you. You can get our multilingual brochures on our website. You can get more information about any of, public benefits access, healthcare access, the work we've been doing with IAFN and NEWAP and legal rights of immigrant survivors. We have all kinds of resources available to you and to the colleagues that you work with and the victim advocates you work with in your communities. Any last words, Corin? Back to you, I think. Oh,
No last words. I just want to say thank you to Leslie and NWAP for doing this webinar for us. And just to keep a lookout for, we have one more webinar that is going to be focused on payment and related in states. That's going to be coming out. We have not confirmed a date, but it will be in September. So just keep a lookout for that one. And then again, I put all of the links in so that you can contact us for any TA questions, either through forensicnurses.org and the Ask a Nurse button, or through safetya.org through the Contact Us button. Thank you guys for coming to this webinar, and hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you to Leslie again.
oh, thank you, Corin. Thank you, Mary Kate, for supporting us in this webinar. And thank to all of you for attending and all the great work you're doing out there in the community. We really appreciate it on behalf of sexual assault survivors, immigrant survivors, and all the people you work with.